the introversion, extroversion bit is going to prick up people's ears. It certainly did mine. I like time alone. I also like time alone in the presence of many people. In fact, I get my best work done always either alone in nature or in Manhattan, where there are people around me, but I'm completely isolated.
I love that too.
So how should we think about introversion and extroversion? These things get thrown around so much in popular culture. Are there some solid scientific studies that support that introversion can best be defined as blank and extroversion as blank? And I'm guessing there's a range there. It's got to be on a continuum. It can't be two bins.
I mean, for some people, it's very clear. They are a clear traded introvert. And for some people, they're just like endlessly extrovert, no matter. They wake up wanting to be with people. At the end of the day, they want to go out with people more. And so what research shows, for example, with creative people is they tend to be both. They tend to be high introverts and high extroverts, which is interesting, right? They're introverts when they're doing their art, and then they're extroverts when they're out there selling their art, which is hard for some artists, right? Because a lot of artists are kind of introspective and they're creative types, but they really struggle with getting out there and being that extroverted, like, look at my art. And so you're the lucky artist if you are traded in both directions. I think the easiest way to think about it is just this: it's a proclivity. Right? It's a proclivity to how you want to use your energy. And the introvert is more a container, wants to contain their energy. They want to, be in small groups. They want kind of less frenetic environments. And the extrovert just has a proclivity for, more sensation-seeking, larger social groups. And again, it's a preference. I always say I'm an introvert with pretty good social skills. Like, I can appear to be extroverted. Most people think I'm outgoing. And I always tell, I don't even like people that much.
You seem very outgoing.
Yeah, I'm not. It's just not, it's not my natural, if I'm at a party, I struggle with what am I going to do here?
When you say you don't necessarily like people
I'm
that much, I realize you're joking. But, and I was just going to make sure to ask, because I can't presume, that doesn't mean that you dislike people. It's just that being in the presence of a lot of people doesn't draw you out to want to be closer to or get to know all these people simply because they're there. Whereas an extrovert seems to really like forming and engaging in new relationships, old relationships, all relationships, relating.
Exactly. If you're running a campaign to run for, mayor of your town, you want to hire an extroverted PR person, right? An extroverted person do marketing, because they're going to be out there banging on the doors, not very comfortable talking to people, right? The introvert is going to be better at doing the accounting, and doing the planning. And we've done this research actually. If even fun with my students, I would have them take their take measures that are valid measures of introversion and extroversion. I would score them into groups, get the really extroverted group and the really introverted group, and I'd have them plan a party. Just go plan a party. And the group of extroverts, there's bonfires, there's beer, there's loud music on the beach. And the introverts are we have to make sure we have good napkins. We want to, we're going to have 4 people. It's going to be quiet music. That's just, how we're built.
Interesting. When I think of throwing a great party, and I've thrown a few, what I like to think were great parties, it involves inviting a bunch of people over and then being able to stand back from a lot of it and not have to participate in all of it. I just like seeing friends that didn't know each other start to interact.
That's cool.
That's fun for me. And then if I have to communicate directly with too many people at the party, I would definitely feel drained. I'm known to retreat to a room and take a nap or
so maybe you are more introverted.
Yeah, I think so. Rick Rubin, who's world renowned for his creative insights and creativity, and for being Rick, I think once said on a podcast perhaps, or maybe he said this to me, that Tom Petty was the sort of person that basically didn't do anything besides write music and read books and interact with the small number of people in his inner circle. And the idea of leaving the house was just completely overwhelming to him. Now, of course, people were always approaching him, but really, really extreme introvert. Whereas Rick has described, and I won't name names here, other famous people, musicians and otherwise, that go out specifically to try and get the attention of fame.
Yeah.
And if they don't, they feel absolutely isolated.
Makes sense.
Even though they have people in their private life, it's sort of like it becomes a kind of extroversion requirement. I would imagine life is much harder for the extrovert in the long run because there's
the
just so
research
much
shows that
need
the
there.
extroverts tend to do, have a little bit more success because they're more willing to get out there and ask for it. They get raises more quickly.
I see.
And in my work in schools, I always ask teachers to pay attention to the personality of their students because the introvert has a lot of great ideas. They're just not dying to raise their hand and get the attention. So don't just call on the kids who are raising their hands because you're missing out on getting some great information.
In that case, do you cold call on people? Whenever I'm teaching, I somewhat reluctant to cold call on people because I recall it can be terrifying when suddenly you're sitting there taking notes, trying to organize your thoughts around the material, and then suddenly the whole room's looking at you.
I set expectations around that, and because I'm really particular about that because it drives me crazy when the talkative extrovert is always getting their thing said. I think there's good instructional practices that can help with that. One thing I'm thinking about though is this intersection of personality and emotional intelligence. You just kind of brought that up for me, and people confuse those a lot. So for example, I even confused it when I was younger before I studied it because I'm high also in neuroticism, meaning I am more mercurial in terms of I worry about things and I'm fine, then I worry again. That's who I am. And I just always assumed that someone who is high in neuroticism or, more, as I said, kind of volatile emotionally, that was just low emotional intelligence. Because how could you be emotionally intelligent if you're emotionally volatile? And then I did all this research and found there's pretty much no correlation between personality traits and emotional intelligence. And why is that? Well, think about it. If you're someone who is more even-keeled, maybe you don't even have that much of an opportunity to regulate your emotions, right? But then if you get triggered, you've never had experience, so it's actually harder for you. Someone like me, I'm practicing it all the time, right? I'm always I'm in a bad mood, I got to give a meeting. I'm irritable, I got to give a presentation. So I'm constantly figuring out how to deal with my emotions. And that's why they're separate concepts. And in addition to it, just to build on this, knowing your personality traits can be extraordinarily helpful for choosing the best strategies to regulate your emotions. Why is that? I was traveling in Australia recently, and I gave this speech to a group of people. The person who was the person in charge of the speech, it was about an hour from Melbourne. And I took the train because I preferred to stay in the city. Took the train out. I had bought my train ticket back. The convener said, Mark, I just really would love to be with you. And can we just, can I drive you back to your hotel? And I'm thinking to myself, that is the worst thing you could ever ask me.
And on the wrong side of the road.
Yeah. And I had my train ticket. It was a full day of presentations and stuff. I really wanted to be by myself to decompress. But I felt bad and I said, sure. The guy talked to me for an hour, he just non-stop talked to me. I got back to my hotel. I was I am going to have a nervous breakdown. I need another day to recover and it annoyed me about myself not practicing, what I teach, which was, Mark, know thyself, you're drained, be polite. It was my insecurity of just saying, I really appreciate you wanting to drive me back, but, I really have a lot to do tomorrow. I need to rest my voice. I need to, do some prep. Instead, I just sat there shaking and having just went crazy. So do you see what I'm getting at? Really knowing yourself in terms of what drives you and what your personality traits, just introversion, extroversion alone, and how that relates to your selection of strategies is so important.
Super important. And by the way, my joke about driving on the wrong side of the road, I do realize that we drive on the wrong side of the road for Australians and those in the UK. So I'll do the touche for you.